We may need to adjust that up a little bit.
You got the volume on, right?
Yes. Gosh. Apologies there for the technical difficulties. Again, this is I'm John Williamson, the superintendent. I certainly want to welcome you tonight to our parent information session for the return to school for the 2021 school year. We're certainly looking forward to seeing your children back in school if that's what you choose for them, or working with them remotely if that's what you choose. Tonight's session will last about an hour. We have information for you to be much more precise and specific than what we've shared with you in the past. I think you'll discover why it's taken this long to sort of put the pieces together. Before I begin into a presentation with all the details that you're here to find out about, I want to introduce two guests that we have with us tonight. Dr. David McFadden, who's the interim president for Eastern Kentucky University, and also Dr. Brian McKinnon, who's the executive director for public safety and risk management, also known as our COVID coordinator this year. So I'm going to turn it over to President McFadden for a few remarks before we get underway.
Well, thank you, Mr. Williamson. I appreciate it. To all the parents and the teachers and the administrators, thank you all for joining us tonight. Looking forward to an informational session that hopefully starts to answer some additional questions as we get closer to the start of the school year. As I had a town hall meeting with our faculty and our staff a couple of weeks ago, we had a chance to talk a little bit about model and the model return to school plan. And so we appreciate you, Mr. Williamson, and your team having this session for the parents and the teachers and all those concerned parties tonight. One thing I will say to the group is Dr. McKinnon and his team have done amazing work in preparing the campus for the start of this semester for our post-secondary work. I will equally say that Mr. Williamson and his team, they have worked tirelessly throughout the summer to come up with a plan that is a responsible plan that has options, that has been led by the work of those who are experts in what needs to happen in order for us to have school in the safest environment possible. I say that to highlight the fact that there is still much we won't know. This plan is flexible and is evolving on a daily basis, but I want to commend everyone for their work over the past several months in bringing this plan together. Look forward to the presentation tonight and a chance to support any questions or answer any questions that may need my support in that way. So thank you, Mr. Williamson, for the opportunity to share with the group, and look forward to the presentation.
Just so everyone is aware that Dr. McFadden will be with us for the presentation and can take some questions at the end if you have anything you want to direct to him, as well will Dr. Mackinnon. Both will be available as we move through the presentation. I have to say that the plan that we're going to share with you tonight is not one that I put together by myself by any means, or one that even our administrative team put together, but it's as everything that we do at Model, it's based on the Model family and representatives from our faculty, our staff, and most importantly, our parents, all working together to come up with a plan that is, as President McFadden said, that is safe and that we say here that provides a quality education for all of our students. So as you can see here, we had a wide variety of folks giving input and helping make this plan the best that it can be. Now, one thing that I do want to highlight tonight is that what we're talking about, all the information that I'm giving you is current as of today, which is the 20th. And I say that because information continues to emerge almost hourly about what is the best practice and what we should do in schools to open in a safe manner. So the guidance that we have been taking comes from the governor's office, as well as federal and state and local guidelines that are established by the Department of Education, the local health department, and the Department for Public Health. In addition, we also try to conform to the guidelines that are being used at the university. Even though we are our own K-12 school, we're also part of a larger campus at EKU, and we want to fit into their policies and practices, although that we do have some deviations because we're dealing with students in K-12. So as I mentioned, the plan is true as of today. And when people ask us what could affect that plan, it could be or cause us to change our plan. It would be if additional guidance comes out, or if the conditions of public health change, or certainly governor's orders or orders from the Commissioner of Education. So we will continue to keep you informed. If you want to see a list of some of the documents that have sort of informed our work, the documents started coming from the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, on April the 10th. You can see this is what we call a brief overview, not an exhaustive list by any means, but documents started coming to us on April 10th about how to open school. And the most recent document arrived this morning on how to open school in terms of thinking about daily participation in non-traditional instruction. So it seems to me that nearly on a daily basis, if not daily, weekly, we get new guidance in what we have to do. So each document that we receive informs our work in some way. So I anticipate we'll continue to get guidance, and our plan may continue to evolve. As we think about our return to school, I think most of you know there are two ways that students will return to school. The first is face-to-face instruction. And that looks very much like what students attended up through the third quarter of last year. And we'll talk a little more about it. The second return to school, which I think most of you have more questions about, would be our remote instruction. In terms of remote instruction, there are three different ways that students can come back to school remotely. The first is an elected, a choice that you as a parent are choosing for your child to be educated remotely. We're calling that elected remote instruction. You are electing that. And we've asked you to be thoughtful about the reasons why you might elect that sort of education for your child, and be thinking about the health conditions that your child has, him or herself, or other people in your household. We're asking you to make the decision for elected remote instruction based on medical needs or based on your concern because of the pandemic, not just a choice to use remote learning at home just because you prefer that. The second kind of remote learning would be required remote learning. And required remote learning will occur when a student, if we have any confirmed cases of COVID-19 or any students who are identified through contact tracing. If students are test positive or identified through contact tracing, we will require them to go on remote instruction. And the third type of remote instruction is what has been referred to as NTI, or non-traditional instruction. And that would mean the entire school is going remote for some reason. It may be that we have a high number of cases, or we have a large number of faculty or staff out, or it may be required by the Commissioner of Education or the governor. So 3 types of remote: elected, you make that choice; required, and that would be a short term because the student has tested positive or has been identified through contact tracing; or the non-traditional, and we would all be on remote instruction. So for the fall 2020 semester, it has come to my attention that many of you would like a little longer to decide about whether or not you want to go remote, and you needed more information. I've received quite a few emails asking particular questions about our remote instruction options. So tonight we hope to answer the majority of those questions. Therefore, we have extended the deadline for folks to apply for remote instruction to this Friday, July 24th. Okay, this Friday, July 24th. Some may ask why we need to know now. We're not starting school until the 24th, and that is because we need to build class sections. Our intention right now is that students who are being taught virtually, especially in the primary grades, will be taught by a teacher who is just teaching virtually. And in order to build those class sections, we need to know who is going to be virtual and who will not be virtual. And third, we need to think about the secondary program and identifying whether or not we need to build virtual sections for high school teachers as well. So basically, it's a planning need. In order for us to provide the kind of instruction you want with the information you need, we need time to do that. So let's talk a little bit about face-to-face instruction. For those of you who intend to send your children back to model, our first day of classes this year will be Monday, August the 24th. We will start at 7:40 a.m. each day. That's a little earlier. Excuse me, our doors will open at 7:40. Our classes will start at 7:50. That's 10 minutes earlier than normal. Our students will not be marked tardy until 8 a.m. We will use that first 10 minutes to do our morning announcements and our pledge and so on. So that should give folks sufficient time to actually get in the building. And classes will dismiss at 3:10. Now, the reason that we've extended our day by that extra 30 minutes from last school year is because that allows us to bank 30 minutes each day, or the equivalent of 15 days over the course of the school year, that would exempt us from having to go NTI should we need to go to NTI. What that would mean is we would have 15 days that we could decide locally not to use for NTI if school needed to be out. All right, so we will make more decisions about that later, but that extra time is allowing us to bank 15 days. So for folks who are coming back to school, you may want to know how school will be different. We will be following all of the Department of Ed recommendations and guidelines that were shared by the governor a few weeks back. First of all, there will be daily temperature checks. So before students are allowed into classrooms, they will have a daily temperature check from the teacher. Masks will be required for all faculty, staff, and students in grades 1 through 12. They're optional in kindergarten. And if a student has a medical exemption or a need that would prohibit him or her from wearing a mask, we recommend that that family applies to remote instruction, because masks are required when students are moving from class to class, or when they're cannot be 6 feet apart from each other. We will be social distancing as much as possible, but as many of you know, our building is small. We have a tight infrastructure, so we will not be able to separate students 6 feet apart in the classroom. So that's why we will be requiring the masks. And we will be doing social distancing where we can. Because we're not allowed to have large gatherings in our school, lunch will be served in the classrooms. We will be limiting visitors in our building. So there'll be very few visitors this year in the building. We will not be having large assemblies. We will try to rely more on remote virtual events. We have to limit the sharing of resources from student to student in the classroom. And of course, we will have enhanced cleaning procedures that are part of our daily routine. So those are some of the ways that school will be different. We're also trying to find ways to make school as normal as possible. So we are working on a scheduled rotation for outdoor lunch rotations so that students will be able to remove their masks and eat outside from time to time. We will be having some of our classes periodically having them outdoors. We will be following national guidelines for physical education, so students still will be participating in PE and recess, and we've also included some additional breaks in the day. So we are trying to respond to the new challenges that we have in front of us. We've heard from parents, we've heard from students that they want those extra breaks, they want physical movement, and we are trying to find ways to build them into the school day. So Eric, can we go forward a couple of slides there? Okay, so some folks may want to know about what data we've used locally from parents and students to inform our plan. And I think most of you know at the end of the school year, we sent out a survey to students and parents asking about our NTI efforts. And I just want to share these data with you. 24% of our parents report that having in-person school is essential. So we have about a quarter of our folks who say their work schedules, their family situations are such that students need to be in school and they do not have another way to manage their family situation if school is not open. We had about 24% of our parents also report, a different 24%, that either their child or someone in their household was vulnerable and that they would need us to think about a remote option. So we had a quarter of our parents who say we must be in school, and a quarter of our parents say that they really need a virtual option, and the other 50% or so are in the middle. They prefer school being open, but they could manage if it were not. When we asked our students about the number of sessions that they needed per week and what would help them learn most, and we're talking about our students in grades 4 through 12, just over half of them felt that they needed 2 sessions per week to support their learning, two instructional sessions with a teacher. So as to sort of follow up and reiterate some of the information that we had shared with you earlier in our newsletter, we are holding true that all of our students in grades K through 12 would have a minimum of 2 remote contact sessions per week with additional assignments in the interim. I'm going to go into a lot more detail about this in just a moment, but that is still true. Our students will not have any fewer than 2 remote sessions per week. These sessions will be virtual classes with the teacher and with other students. So they're not just a check-in. Some folks have asked me about that. Are these check-ins? And the answer is no. They're actually class sessions that are led by the teacher and include other students. If your child is on a 504 or an IEP, we will provide all the support and accommodations, whether your student is remote or in face-to-face. We will be providing all of our accommodations as required by federal law. And also, a question comes up, will the students be learning the same content? And the answer is yes. All our students, whether enrolled remotely or virtually or face-to-face, will be taught the same skills, content, goals, and objectives. Now, in some cases, the pedagogy may change. The activities that students are doing, whether they be in person or at home, might be a little different. But the skills, the content, the learning objectives, and so on will be the same no matter how the student is receiving instruction. So first, let's talk about grades K through 3, our primary program. because our intermediate and secondary program is a little different. So if you are a parent of a student in kindergarten through third grade, this is for you, and you'll want to pay really particular attention right now. So for elected and NTI remote instruction, okay, grades K through 3, elected and remote, that means that either you have chosen remote learning, or we have to remove to everybody on remote learning. So either of those two situations applies. This is what will happen. There will be an assigned virtual only teacher. All the virtual students will be having a teacher who is only teaching virtually. That teacher will not be teaching face-to-face. On Mondays through Thursdays, or 4 days a week, there will be small group synchronous, that means live sessions with the teacher and with other students who are also being taught virtually. There will be 3 30-minute sessions, one 30-minute session on reading and language arts, one 30-minute session on mathematics, and another 30-minute session that will alternate among social studies, science, and writing. So that's 4 days a week, 3 30-minute sessions that are not back-to-back. We have not built that schedule completely yet because we need to know exactly how many students are going to be doing remote. But it will be 3 times a day, live sessions, language arts, math, and alternating between social studies, science, and writing. And then an additional 20 to 30-minute session from the specials teacher, which would be things like phys ed, health, art, music, media, technology, and those sessions are going to be recorded. There'll be one each day, Monday through Thursday. And then on Fridays, there will be a meet with the counselor session. The first and third Friday of the month will be a group session with the counselor and others who are remote. And the second and fourth Friday of the month will be an individual session with the counselor. And then students and parents can also schedule individual sessions with the teacher on Friday, sort of by appointment if that's necessary or wanted. So that's elected and NTI. So students will have opportunities to actually learn skill instruction, to socialize with other peers, and they will be working in the same curriculum, same content as the students who are in face-to-face instruction for K through 3. Now, the required K through 3. Now remember, required means that a student has been identified or has tested positive for COVID-19 or has been identified through contact tracing and has to be out of school for a short period of time. We're talking a period of about 2 weeks or less. And for those students, we would have a daily 30-minute individual small group direct instruction Monday through Friday with their homeroom teacher. And in addition to that, there would be recorded sessions of 15 to 20 minutes each day for math and language arts, and a 20 to 30-minute session from their specials teacher on Monday through Thursday, and a session with their guidance counselor on Friday. Okay, so that is not quite as intense as the students who are electing remote instruction, because these students are out for a shorter period of time. But they will have daily recorded lessons in language arts and math and meet with the teacher every day in small groups. So that's our elected, that's our required remote instruction for K through 3. Now I'm going to shift to grades 4 through 12, and our 4 through 12 model will apply whether students or parents elect remote instruction, whether it's required because the student has been identified through contact tracing or has tested positive, or whether the whole school is on NTI. And the way this will work is that the assignments for every day of the week, for 5 days for a week, would be posted by the classroom teacher by Monday morning onto Google Classroom. And sometime during the week, and you're going to see a schedule in just a moment, there would be 2 video conference class periods per week at their scheduled class time. So whatever time that class normally would meet, that is the time that that student will Zoom in, to use that sort of proper term if we're Zooming, but they may be doing it through Google or some other media. But they will be coming in live into a live class session with that teacher and with their peers. In addition, if a student has a 504 or an IEP or has RTI needs, there may be additional time above and beyond those 2 sessions per week. So the way this would work for our grades 4, 5, and 6, on Mondays and Wednesdays, they would have English and social studies and an elective. So grades 4 through 6 would have 60 minutes of language arts, 40 minutes of social studies, and 30 minutes of an elective on Monday and Wednesday. And on Tuesday and Thursday, they would have 60 minutes of math, 40 minutes of science, and 30 minutes of an elective. So those are virtual class sessions that they are required to attend with the teacher and with other students. That's where direct instruction would be provided. On Tuesday and Thursday, in addition to those video sessions, there would also be class assignments provided in English, social studies, and their elective, and vice versa. On Tuesday and Thursday, they would have, on Monday and Wednesday, they would have assignments from their math teacher, science teacher, and electives teacher. And then on Friday, those students in grades 4 through 6 would have a counseling meeting with their counselor, and it would alternate between group sessions and individual sessions. So those electives, there would be 1 elective per week in each of the subjects: art, music, Spanish, media, and drama. Okay, so that's our students in grades 4 through 6. In grades 7 through 12, which is our secondary program, it's very similar to our intermediate program, but these classes, I think you know, are 50 minutes in length. On Monday and Wednesday, the students would have English, social studies, humanities, and arts classes. Those would be virtual at the time they're scheduled in the school day. They would be live with the teacher and other students. And in the off days, meaning Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, there would be written assignments on Google. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, our students would tune in to math courses, science courses, technology, and physical education courses. Those classes would be live with the teacher and their peers. And on Monday and Wednesday, they would have written assignments that support the learning they did in Tuesdays and Thursdays that would be assigned through Google. On Fridays, the students would meet in sessions with their counselor, and they would have individual check-ins with their teachers as necessary. This schedule would remain true, except for students who are on an IEP or have a 504, and they may have additional time for support as specified in those plans. So that sort of covers, I think, the general plan for our students actually having direct instruction from a teacher. And you can see that they will be with their peers most of those times, but they also will have work that will support the learning that they received in their video sessions in the off days. Okay, now I want to switch over and talk a little bit about extracurriculars, because the question has come up about our extracurricular activities. First and foremost, I want to make sure that everyone knows that, especially in athletics, we're following all of the Kentucky High School Athletic Association guidelines. So we will not do anything that goes outside the realm of what they allow, with one exception. This is the participation in extracurricular activities. And I think in the note that I had sent to you, our faculty and I, we had discussed about participation, and the question came up of whether or not students who are not attending school face-to-face for a medical reason should be permitted to participate in extracurriculars. And our initial thought was, no, if someone has a medical condition or lives with someone who does, that increased exposure is probably not good. Upon further examination, and folks have brought forward some really good logic, that there are some extracurriculars that are done independently or in small groups or outside that would not bring increased risk to family members or to the student. So what we're going to ask is that parents who wish their students to participate, students who are attending school remotely, who've elected remotely, and would want to participate in an extracurricular, explain to us, write a justification of how that would not be endangering the child or someone in the family for them to participate in that extracurricular. And we will we'll take that into consideration. And in most cases, we believe that it will be okay. So for folks who want further clarification about that, in terms of athletics, please speak to our athletic director, Scotty Sutton. And for clubs and organizations, you certainly can speak to high school principal Laura Daddick or our elementary principal, David Naylor, and they can help guide you with that justification. But it'll be something very simple for you to explain. Now, if a student is required to go on remote, that means they've tested positive for COVID or they've been identified through contact tracing, then they will not be permitted to participate in any face-to-face or extracurricular activities at school, just because they'll be in quarantine or isolation as required by the health department or their medical professional. So hopefully that helps clarify the extracurriculars, and we've been a little more, I guess, fair or clear about that. I've had several Q&As, and I thought what might help is if I just go through some of these Q&As now, because you may have these questions that get typed in the chat or are asked virtually in a moment. So let me just share the answers with these. One is, what would cause model to resort to NTI for school-wide? What would cause that? First, it could be an order from the governor or the commissioner of education, or an order from our local health department, or maybe we have a high percentage of students who tested positive or who were identified through contact tracing. But the number one fear that I have here in terms of NTI is that that if a number of our teachers or staff are identified through contact tracing or test positive for COVID, we would not be able to provide adequate education because we don't have the number of teachers or staff that we need. We do not have a very deep substitute teacher pool or substitute paraeducator pool. So if any of you are interested in becoming a substitute teacher this year, you have 64 college hours, or you know someone who is interested in doing that, we invite you to apply to be a substitute, because that is one of our greatest fears in terms of having to go NTI school-wide. Someone asked earlier today, why can't we just wait until closer to school to say whether we want to go remote, or can we come back sooner? If we choose remote now and we want to come back in 3 or 4 weeks and come back to face-to-face, can we do that? And the answer is no. We're going to ask you to make a decision for the semester, because we're building our class sections based on how many students are going to be going virtually and how many students are going to be face-to-face. And we won't be able to redo our entire master schedule for all our students and all our teachers on a weekly basis. So we've decided that the most logical point to reconsider reshuffling students around would be at the semester, because it doesn't just affect those coming back in, it also affects those who are in our building face-to-face. So we believe to provide the most consistent education that we can make those changes at the semester. Another question came up is, if we're receiving remote instruction, do we have to pay full tuition? And I think most of you who have been around with us at Model for a while know that we run a very tight budget at Model. Our per pupil spending is lower than the state of Kentucky's average. It takes all that we generate in tuition and that all that we receive from state appropriation and what's appropriated through EKU's budget for us to meet our operating expenses. So even if students are on remote and you may perceive that they're not receiving the same amount of time from a teacher, we are still paying that teacher, and we are still paying the benefits for that teacher and staff. And we've sort of said before, this is not the best situation that we found ourselves in, but in order for Model to remain a school of choice for each of you and for people in our community, we need to all stand together and support it, both in the good times and in the bad times, so to speak. And so we do have the same expenses, whether or not you are individually going remote or not. We've had another question asked by several parents that why can't we have remote instruction all day, every day? And some folks have suggested, can we just not put a webcam in the back of the room and then tune in when, when we can or when our students are ready? And the answer to that is really that merely just observing what's happening in a classroom is not the same as a child or student receiving direct instruction that's planned. Teaching virtually presents a lot of different challenges for our teachers and for our students. And the pedagogies that we use in face-to-face instruction and the pedagogies that we might use virtually are very different. And so our plan here is to think about both the students who are going to be in front of us, where we can provide a much more constructivist model of education, which model is known for. And for those who have to be at home right now because of the pandemic, because of health reasons, receive a quality education, but maybe not using that constructivist pedagogy. So we are doing our very best to meet both needs as best we can, the students who are in front of us, as well as the students who are learning at home. So we have come up with what we believe is a compromise to provide in-person instruction for those who are in front of us and remote instruction for those who are at home. Another question is, if we choose remote, how will we get materials? We'll need some of the textbooks, we'll need iPads, we may need workbooks and other resources. And that answer is you're exactly right, you will. We will, once we have a list of the students who will be choosing remote, we will put supply kits together for them with their books and workbooks and all the materials they need. We will have those together, and we're scheduling individual appointments the week of August 17th for parents and students to come meet the teacher and pick up the materials that they need for remote instruction. So I think those are the biggest questions that we've received. There may be more, and I'm certain that there are. Eric, I'm going to call upon you to share out questions. If you can find ones that are thematic and sort of go together, that would be helpful. And we will answer them and provide. And some things, just as you know, we don't yet have the answer for because we're continuing to get guidance. But I'll tell you what I know and what is planned for tonight. So if you want to type questions in the chat, that would be very helpful. Do we have folks joining on YouTube? Or are we over our cap on Zoom? No, we are not. Okay. So most of you should be in Zoom and are able to type in the chat box.
Okay. So I'm just going to start chronologically.
Okay.
As I keep populating in. Could you clarify a couple of operational things like lunch? How will they eat with a mask on? And why can't students be dropped off at 7:15 like they were before with kids going to the library?
Okay, so let me answer each one of those separately. So the question is, they're going to be eating in their rooms and something about masks while they're eating.
How will they eat with masks on?
How will they eat with masks on? Well, there would be no way a student could eat with masks on. So students are permitted to remove the mask when they're eating or drinking. And that's what they would be doing during lunch. And again, I think I mentioned that we are working on scheduled times each week that different classes can go outside for lunch as long as the weather permits. So that would be to reduce even the potential for spread there. The second question asked, why can we not drop our students off at 7:15? The issue there is that we have to cohort students as much as possible. And what we did at 7:15 is we had all the students who were being dropped off early go into the library or go into the auditorium, and we had a teacher in there. The challenge is that we're not able to spread those students out far enough in those two places in order for someone to watch them. If I open the doors at 7:15, now we would have to send each one of those students to their classroom, which would mean our teachers would have to come in at 7:15 and just supervise the number of students they had who were being dropped off early. So it's just not a feasible option for us in the circumstances that we're in. We can't mix the cohorts and bring them all together in one location in the mornings like we used to be able to do. So we are going to be open at 7:40, and that will be from 7:40 to 8 for drop-offs. Those students will go directly to those homerooms at that point. So maybe that wasn't clear about that. At 7:40, all teachers will be in their rooms, and students will go directly to their classroom rather than going to a holding area until class starts. So they will actually go into their classrooms at that time. Teachers will be here at 7:40.
This one's pretty short.
Okay.
How many total students are attending the school year?
So as of, Eric, do you have that handy? As of this morning, we had
679.
679 students who will be in school enrolled total. And we had about, as of this morning, about 80 applications for remote learning. But again, we're extending that deadline as I notified you in the newsletter on Friday through this Friday. So that number may go up. But as of this morning, there were 80 students who had applied for remote learning.
Could you explain why we chose not to use the alternating schedules since we are unable to properly social distance in all areas of the school?
Yeah, so the question is, why did we not choose to use what is called the hybrid model, which means you divide your school population in half. Half the students come on Monday, Wednesday, and every other Friday, and the other half of the population in each grade comes Tuesday, Thursday, and every other Friday. The reason is because the data point that I showed you a few moments ago, that 25% of our parents said that they needed school to be open every day. They were not able to navigate a family situation and find childcare and pay tuition on if they were not having a consistent everyday schedule. So I know that about 25% of our families are families who work at the university. I know the university has a very flexible work model where staff are telecommuting, faculty have chosen when and how to have their classes. We're given those choices. But you have to realize that there are 25% or more of our families who don't have that kind of flexibility, who work a regular schedule from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 and need us to work with their children during the day. So we're trying to meet their needs as well.
So I'm trying to look at all of the, trying to group them. Is there any requirement for, is there any requirement for mandatory testing for teachers, students, any of that before school starts?
As of this moment, no. And President McFadden, if you want to add anything there from the university's perspective, or Dr. Mackinnon, if either of you want to add anything about required testing for faculty or for students. Nothing has been shared with me from the Department of Education, so I don't know that there is any required as of yet. That doesn't mean that there won't be by the time school starts. So,
yeah, so Mr. Williamson, the protocol right now will be, first off, if you're sick, please don't come to work, don't come to school. That's the first most important thing to do. Next would be if you're a primary contact or have reason to believe that you've been exposed to COVID-19, you need to contact the health department, or the health department may contact you if you're a primary contact. I can assure you that you will be informed if you need to be tested, but do not return to school if you're sick. That means tummy ache, headache, fever. Right now, the number of symptoms are numerous. So I think we have to have an abundance of caution when it comes to sending anyone to school sick this year. We will be at the institution, very flexible on attendance and those types of things. And Mr. Williamson, I'll let you speak to your attendance flexibility at Model as well. But right now, the guiding principles are: if you're sick, don't come. And if you have reason to believe that you've been exposed, you either need to get a test, you should get a test, or you should contact the health department.
Yeah. So thank you, President McFadden. For grades 4 through 12 about attendance, because we've set up this regular schedule that works for elected remote, required remote, or NTI, a student who's absent will be able to join in with his or her class on that regular schedule. It's already set up. They're a member of that class and of Google Classroom. They can just go right in. If a student is going to be out more than one day in primary, we would need to know that, and we can put them into that rotation as well. So yes, we'll be flexible with attendance, but in many cases, the students will be able to just continue on virtually because they know the schedule.
So this one's about specific classes. So could you talk a little bit more about what we know and what we don't know as far as band, orchestra, and physical education?
Yes. So there are particular guidelines for band and for PE, and we are currently reviewing them and we'll be implementing them. Band has distancing between based on what the instrument is and how far apart you have to be. So we have plans now to have many of our classes for band outside on those off days. And Mr. Sokolowski has identified with us some virtual programs where students can play independently. He can listen and give feedback. So there will be a mix of in-class, in-person instruction and independent practice on those off days for those students who are not able to be outside with him practicing as a group. But we do intend to run our band classes virtually, our orchestra classes virtually, and our phys ed classes virtually.
Are we still, I forgot to put in the slides, extended learning?
Yes. So someone has asked about extended learning, and the answer is yes. We will still run extended learning. It will be treated as a class, as a cohort in and of itself. Jana Mayer does a wonderful job leading that program. The application is already available online. We are working to make that a virtual application so that you don't have to send in a piece of paper, but we will be running extended learning starting on the 24th, our first day of school, until 6 p.m. each day.
Anticipated class sizes?
Well, it depends on how many people choose virtual and how many are actually choosing face-to-face. Our class caps in primary are 25 students, and in intermediate, 29 students, and in high school, 31 students. So some of our classes are at those levels, or at those totals, and others are not. So it just depends on what grade that a student is in, how many students are electing remote, and how many students are going to be face-to-face.
How will students be handled if they refuse to wear a mask? And then after that, if you could address lockers.
Okay, so the situation with masks is that I hope it doesn't come to this, because we all understand where we are as a community, as a state, and we've done a lot to make progress to slow the spread. And certainly we don't want our students to be part of something that would increase the spread of COVID-19. On campus, it's a requirement that all faculty and students wear masks when they're in public places, when they're in class, and we will continue that here. Our faculty will be modeling that behavior, and we hope our students will conform, if you want to think of it that way. I think you may have seen in the newsletter, you see a sneak peek of the masks to come, but we're going to encourage students to have masks that represent their identities of who they are and what they value and things that they're interested in. We will have school spirit masks and so on. And we even have masks that are disposable here if students forget them. So we're going to make it an ordinary, everyday occurrence. You will certainly be in the minority and certainly feel out of place if you're not wearing a mask. That being said, if we have students who refuse to wear masks, we are treating those as dress code violations according to our student handbook. And so the first time is a warning, and the second time is after school detention. The third time is suspension, and then if it's chronic, it could lead to expulsion. But certainly we would hope that our students at Model understand their community responsibility and our school and university rules. The second question Eric, was about lockers. So the intention right now is to have students going to lockers in shifts. We are not sharing lockers this year. We have enough lockers. We were able to retrieve some lockers from the university. We've installed more lockers at Model, so there'll be no sharing of lockers. And because students have iPads, several of their textbooks are available virtually, so they won't have to carry as many things around. So we don't anticipate that they'll be going to their lockers as much, but when they do it, it will be in shifts. But they will still have a locker and they will not be shared.
So there's a couple of questions about contact tracing.
Yes? Or is there a question or is it just a comment about it?
I think Mr.
Questions
Williamson,
about if, oh, sorry.
Was that Brian McInerney? Or-
no, that was me.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Mr. Williamson. Yeah, the question was related to contact tracing for students and what that protocol would be. And so the health department standards will continue to evolve. But if there's a diagnosed case, there will be an interview that happens with the health department. The student would then identify, the class that they're in. They would work with the administration to identify the students in that class. And for children, it's a little more difficult process because of the interview process is a little bit harder than working with an adult. But I think that Dr. McInerney, who's on with us, could speak a little bit to our partnership with Madison County Health Department on contact tracing.
Absolutely. Thank you. John, can you hear me okay? My microphone tends to not work from time to time. My apologies. The university is engaging Madison County Health Department in a partnership where we are assisting them in the contact tracing that will occur, and model is included in that envelope. So we'll have a very few but dedicated professionals who will be trained as contact tracers in partnership with Madison County Health Department. And essentially from a 30,000 foot view, what that looks like, and it's a standard definition across the state, is that they will look for anybody who is within 6 feet of, for 10 minutes or more at a time, of somebody who is known to have a confirmed positive case of COVID. And what will happen is anybody who becomes a primary contact will then be, will work certainly with that student and will certainly with their parents or their guardians relative to what that will mean moving forward. And traditionally what that will be, to prepare everyone, is a quarantine for 14 days. And we will absolutely work with those students and with those families relative to what that's going to mean and how they can have opportunities to continue their instruction during that time period. Does anybody have any more specific questions on contact tracing? There's a lot that goes into it, but that's the 30,000 foot view.
Let me add something to that, Dr. McInerney. We have also been working, our faculty were in last Thursday and Friday in setting up their classrooms. We followed the guidelines from the Department of Ed, which require all students to face the same direction. In those places where that wasn't possible, we have plexiglass partitions for those students that are clear plexiglass partitions. But our teachers have made seating charts for their classrooms. And once they know who's in their classes, we will have these permanent seating charts that will help with the contact tracing. So our faculty are part of this solution. We're all working together, already started last week, so that we have protocols in place should we have to work with the health department and identify those individuals.
Mr. Williamson, would you mind to speak to the faculty's involvement in kind of designing the program for this year and their election to participate in the way that they're participating?
Yes. We are concerned about our students. We're concerned about our faculty. And I've been in contact with them in terms of explaining that that we are worried about their health. We want them to work in a healthy environment. And we've asked them to consider whether or not they believe they can do their job effectively and safely in the environment that we're in. And I have to say that we have had only 2 faculty members or faculty and staff members who've expressed concern about that. One, we will find a remote situation for that person to be able to teach, and the other wants to really be with the students and is aware of the situation they're in. So our faculty have been involved in how we've designed this program from the beginning. Now, if we have a large portion or percentage of students who want to have education remotely, we have teachers who are willing and want to teach remotely. We also have our teachers who really want to be here and be with your students. So I think we're going to be able to provide the kind of education that you believe is appropriate for your child in this circumstance, whether it be remote or virtual. Now, Dr. McFadden, are you also want me to talk about their involvement in the design of the program, or just into their work of whether they feel comfortable being here?
I think you addressed the nature of a few questions that had popped up there, given their election to teach in that way. But I also think that the fact that this has been a very faculty-led curriculum design is very important.
Yes, from beginning to end, we took input from faculty. We looked at all levels to try to decide what we could do and weighing it against the regulations and guidance. All our faculty we met with last Thursday and Friday, and I believe all of them are behind this model moving forward because they believe they're able to implement a pedagogy that is appropriate for your children. Either way. Eric?
Could you address some specific questions about movement? So between classes and any more details about dismissal or arrival, about how we're going to facilitate those?
Yeah, so the question comes up about arrival, dismissal, and class changes. And what I will tell you is not all of that is completely planned out. I have to be totally honest with you. We are not there. It depends. Part of it depends on how many students elect to go remote versus how many are here. What I can assure you is we will have a comprehensive plan for all of that before school starts. And I can host another meeting and talk about all the operational issues. I will tell you what I do know about those issues as of right now. So we have the 20-minute window as of now for drop-offs in the morning. Students will go directly to their homerooms. They will not be in a holding area such as the auditorium or the library. That homeroom teacher or that first period teacher will take the temperature, which hopefully parents have done before sending them to school. Students who have a temperature higher than 100 will not be able to come in the classroom. They'll have to be in a holding area, and the parents will have to come get them and take them to the doctor or keep them at home until the fever breaks. So that's the temperature piece. The dismissal will completely depend on how many students are here. We have about 4 models that we've created, or 4 different plans. We've been working with Dr. Mackinnon. Mrs. Puckett's been working really hard to come up with a plan with Mr. Naylor and Mrs. Dedick. And it quite honestly just depends on how many are actually choose to come face to face. The class changes, in some instances in grades 4, well, I think most of us know that in primary, students are in those rooms all day anyway, pretty much, except for when they go to specials. And they will still be going to their special classrooms. We will have arrows on the floor, single direction arrows. So one way to the specials classroom, another path away from the specials classroom. So we've worked on wayfinding and marking our movement pathways in the school. In intermediate, in grades 4 through 7, those students are cohorted through most of their day. So in some instances, the teacher will be moving and not the student, because we're able to cohort those. So our biggest challenge is in high school. And the guidance that we've been giving is, when you move, you mask. So our students, when they pass in the hall, will not be, as Brian pointed out, there for 10 minutes and less than 6 feet apart. They'll be in masks, moving from class to class. So we will be doing that in a shorter amount of time than normal. We're cutting down our travel time between classes to cut down on the socializing between periods.
Could you speak to our use of plexiglass and what we're planning to use with that?
Yeah. So as of right now, we have plexiglass partitions in our public spaces. So where our receptionist is, where you would enter the building, we have that in our main office areas and in our guidance office. So everywhere where a parent would come in and be working with an adult as an initial entry point, we have plexiglass there. In the classrooms, they're only going to be in the classrooms where we were not able to face the students all in the same direction. So they're in mostly our primary classrooms where we had round tables or rectangular tables where there were 4 to 5 students at a table. So we have custom made plexiglass, and I have to tell you, I don't even know the material. Plexiglass is not the exact name of it. It's a new material that doesn't break as easy as plexiglass, but everything's been fabricated and fastened to the tables in a custom way.
Could you address when students who are face-to-face, when they're able to take their masks off?
Yes, so the question is, when can students remove their mask during the school day? And the simple answer is when they're eating or drinking, when they're outside and are not coming into contact with students fewer than 6 feet apart for more than 10 minutes. So that would be recess in phys ed. And also in some situations, if the class itself allowed for spreading out more than 6 feet, they would not be required to wear a mask. We are encouraging all our secondary and middle school students to wear them all day. But it is possible in some of those very small electives, of which we have very few, or if this course was being taught outside and the students were separated by more than 6 feet, that they could remove the mask.
Physical education?
Physical education, yes, if they're doing activities that are not requiring them to come within 6 feet of each other for more than 10 minutes.
For the remote application, is anybody at all required? Could you talk a little bit more about the specifications for the Google form, the remote application? Is anybody required to? What if they have, could you define a medical concern?
Yes. So the question comes up is who's eligible to apply for remote instruction, who isn't? And so our remote instruction application is available online on Google. There's a Google form. We can send that link out again tomorrow when we send this printed material, this deck, so that you have it if you don't have it now. Right now, we have asked that you apply for a medical exemption that does not require a doctor's note or anything from a doctor, but it requires you to tell us that you are concerned about your child's health or someone in your household's health and your child's exposure at school coming back into that household. That's what we're asking you to do. Unlike other school districts who have given remote instruction as an option just for general education, we haven't done that at Model. Model is a school of choice, and parents and students choose Model because we have a constructivist pedagogy. We cannot implement that right now. We're all aware of it. But we don't want to have a situation where folks come to Model to learn remotely. That's not what we're about, learning remotely, although we're going to have to do it in these times. So we want you as a parent to be thoughtful. And if you have a medical concern, then you can apply for a medical exemption. Even if that concern is you are worried about your child's health. That is a medical concern, and that's what you mark. You do not have to have a doctor's note for that. All right, so you're going to mark that on the form. It's a very simple form. You put your child's name, your name, the grade, and the reason. Once we receive all those applications, then we'll send you an email and say you've been approved, and here's what happens next. And that will be coming into school to get the materials, you'll get an appointment, and we'll tell you who your child's teacher will be. So it will be a very simple process. It's not complicated, doesn't require a lot of paperwork. It's a simple application that's online. Now, is that, I don't know if I got all the parts of the question, Eric. Was there something I missed? Oh, does anybody have to do it?
Right.
Does anyone have to do it? And the only folks that I think would need to really think seriously about doing this is if your child, for some reason or other, is not able to wear a mask, I would recommend, strongly recommend, that you fill out the application for remote learning, because masks are going to be required at Model. And they're only required, well, they are required because it's a public health issue, but we've given you an option to have remote learning. So if your child has a medical condition that they cannot wear a mask, then you have an option of remote learning. And that's what you should be taking advantage of. So that's the only group that I think would come close to having to be required to go remotely.
Do they need to fill it out again if they've already filled it out once?
No. If you've already filled this out, if you're one of the 80 parents who filled that out for your child, then you do not need to fill this out again. If you are one of the 80 and now have decided, oh, I think maybe I would be better off in face-to-face, then if you will just shoot Beth Campbell an email, we will take you off the list if you have put in an application and now wish to remove your name.
Could you address dual credit? Is it still happening?
Yes. So the question is dual credit. And remember, dual credit is through Eastern Kentucky University, and we follow their schedule. Those courses are taught by university faculty. They're not taught by model faculty, and our students actually go to campus to take those classes or take them online this semester if they're not being offered face-to-face. So as most of you know, EKU starts before, they start the week before model does. So if a student is enrolled in a dual credit class, he or she should be expect to hear from his or her counselor shortly to say, hey, you must start a week earlier for dual credit. And if that course is being taught face-to-face, then you will be expected to attend it face-to-face on campus. If that course is being taught via web or via hybrid, then you will be expected, your child will be expected to attend in the method of instruction that it's being delivered. So we can help you with that. If you want to reach out to Kelly Caldwell or Jill Folks or Laura Dedick, we will work through those schedules with you. But yes, dual credit is still moving forward in the same way it was before. It just starts a little earlier and will end a little earlier.
How will you handle families that travel close to opening day in regard to the suggested 14-day self-quarantine from the governor?
Yes, so it is a requirement that faculty and students report if they have traveled out of the country or in any of those states for which the governor has said, has an order that students and families are not permitted, or well, they're permitted to go, but must self-quarantine when they come back. So you have to self-report that, and it is a requirement. And those students will have to be in remote instruction during that quarantine period, which means they would go into required remote. So the model of instruction for required remote if they are self-quarantining. Brian Mackinnon, if you would like to add anything to that, feel free. But that is my understanding.
I think, Mr. Williamson, one thing that's important, and there's been a lot of questions about several different protocols. I think I want everyone on here to understand that we are going to adhere to federal and state guidelines and local guidelines from the Madison County Health Department. And while, you know, whether it's the temperature check at 100 degrees, which the CDC recommends 100.4, to the 6-foot social distancing, to any of the other protocols, we're going to do that in consultation with those experts who give us that guidance. We have experts on this campus. We have amazing people who are informed about the nature of infectious diseases, but we also want to make sure that you know, folks understand that we're not making any of these things up arbitrarily, that we're using the guidance that is being given by both state and federal authorities.
But the required remote option is available. So we do have an option for them. Another question, Eric?
Other counties or districts are allowing extracurriculars for students who are remote or NCI. Could you speak to our reason to have a justification?
Yes, because other districts are allowing students to choose remote just for the sake of choosing remote. They're not asking students and families to declare that it's a medical reason is the reason that they're choosing it. So our concern and our faculty's concern is if a student has a medical issue or they live with someone who does, then where would we be as a school in thinking about helping that family remain healthy? And we would seem to be contradicting ourselves if we said we allow them not to come to school, but we allow them to participate in extracurricular activities if they're vulnerable or they live with someone who is. So what we decided to do, rather than make a hard and fast rule one way or the other, is we're allowing parents to give a justification of why in one case it's a health issue and in the other case it's okay. So you can write that up for us and we will, and then we'll review it. So it's permitted, it's permissive, it's just not, it's not mandated. We're going to actually look at it and make a judgment. Eric?
Could you address lunches? Will there be lunches available to purchase, or should they pack them and bring them?
So we've been working with Aramark, our food service provider, and we will have a variety of, say, 10 lunches in 2-week cycles. And we can share that with you shortly. So hamburger, hot dog, ham sandwich, they're things that can be delivered to the classrooms and cleaned up without too much effort. There will also be a vegetarian option each day as well. And so lunch will be served to the classrooms for those students who want it or need it. And of course, students are always welcome to bring their lunch.
Sorry, I'm just getting new ones now. If you have additional questions, now is the time to put them in so that I can.
Yeah, if there are additional questions, feel free to type them in the chat. There are a couple here that I'm seeing pop up.
What, this is one that I forgot that we were supposed to mention before. What is considered a high percent to have the whole school go on NCI?
Yeah. So I don't have an exact number yet from the Department of Education, but I can tell you that that it would hover around 60%, because at that point we would not have enough people to teach virtually and teach in person. So it's not really an illness issue as a mathematical calculation of can we teach virtually and at home with the people we have. There may be a health number too that I'm not aware of yet, but we continue to get guidance, and there may be a particular number. The Department of Ed has not told us that yet in terms of a mathematical number for health.
Is the air conditioning in the classrooms fully operational? It might become hot, become difficult to wear a mask for a long period of time.
I think everyone knows we have infrastructure challenges, and I could tell you this morning that it works, and I could tell you then sometimes at noon it doesn't. So we have been working with our facilities team, and they have been installing some new systems in some of the rooms. But to think that that our systems here will work 100% every day, all day, is not a realistic expectation.
If like a younger child is struggling to wear a mask, or perhaps, well, I guess these are two different questions. If a younger child is struggling to wear a mask all day, how will they be treated? And then as a counterpoint, if a child is struggling to adjust to either, well, to any of the guidelines, will they be able to opt into the remote instruction?
So the first question is, and when we talk about younger child, I'm not sure what we mean in terms of age.
6 or 7.
Okay, so we're saying that kindergarten students are not required to wear masks. We recommend it, but they're not required. Beyond that, masks are required. And so what the best advice I would give you now is to start working with your child now in wearing a mask for extended periods of time, because that's going to be the best way, and not wait till the first day of school and say, oh, we've got to wear a mask, because that's not going to work. So you need to condition them, make it part of normal everyday expectations. So a little bit each day, I think, would be your best strategy to start that now. So the question is, can parents then opt to go remotely? And the answer really is no, because we won't have anywhere for you to go, because I will have assigned teachers to their class maximums to teach virtually, and I won't have anyone available to teach virtually if you choose to go later. So that's why it's very important that you make a decision now for the semester in terms of what you want to do.
Oh, sorry, I just lost it. What do you suggest for families who work directly with patients who possibly have COVID? Do the students need, or are they required to do remote learning regardless?
They are not, we haven't made a requirement that anyone has to do remote learning. I'm saying for those who who have a medical exemption from a mask need to strongly consider it because we will be requiring masks. So for those students who live with families who work with, who are healthcare providers, we do not have a requirement now that says you have to go remote. You can bring your students to school.
So just to clarify one more time, for individuals or parents who have concerns about the family's health, what do you recommend?
In terms of what? If you have
for
concerns
remote instruction?
about your health or your family's health, you can mark that as the rationale for choosing remote, right? You're choosing remote because of a health reason, right? Not because you want your child to go do remote learning. Because whenever we evolve out of this pandemic, we will not have remote learning as an option. That's not a pedagogy that we're building at Model, but it is one that we'll be able to do while we're in a pandemic. So we're not building out a new model of remote education like some school districts may be doing, but we're not doing that.
So we're getting a lot of thank yous. I have more questions, but I guess, do we want to say like how many more questions?
Yeah,
or-
sure. Is there a theme to them?
They're pretty specific.
Okay, they're specific. So we'll take two more. And then if you have a particular one you want to email us directly, we'll get back with you. We intend to post this recording online in the morning, maybe this evening if we can get it all up and going, but for sure by the morning. And we will be sending out to all Model families the communication with this information in writing. We do know there are still some questions that need to be answered about operations and logistics, and we will have another virtual session, informational session like this a little closer to school to answer those operational type questions. What we wanted to get out tonight was information about instruction to help you make a decision about how you wanted to provide education for your child. So we'll take two more questions, Eric.
I don't know if this is worthy for the whole group, but we will be requiring masks if the air is not working, and what steps will be taken if the air conditioning is not working.
Yes, so the answer to the question is, yes, if you're at Model, you're going to be wearing a mask. If the air conditioning is out, we put in a work order ticket with the university, and generally speaking, they come the same day and repair it. However, there are times when a part is needed and it has to be ordered and then repaired. So we do have some classrooms that are not being used that we can move students into those spaces if it's a classroom or two. But if it's a whole area that's out, then we will have to have a backup plan. I'll make a note of it, and it's something I can talk to you about when we get into the operational issues.
What will the sanitation and cleaning procedures look like that are going to be more up to date?
Yeah. So one of the things that, and if Dr. Mackinnon's on here and would like to speak to this, you're welcome to, or President McFadden, if you'd like to address them as well. But the protocols across the university, not just at Model, but also including Model, the cleaning solutions have changed, and they're much more effective. They have a shorter wet life. So things that we think of in terms of like a Clorox wipe might have a 15-minute wet life. We have products here that we're using in school that have a 1-minute wet life in terms of killing bacteria and the virus. So in terms of enhanced products, for sure, we have the hand sanitizing stations throughout the building. Students will have more opportunities throughout the day to wash their hands more frequently. Our custodial team will be cleaning doorknobs and high-touch surfaces more frequently during the day rather than just once in the evening now. That will happen multiple times during the day. And for the few items that are shared between student use or between classes, like microscopes and so on, those will be wiped down between student use. So when we have our our operational meeting. I'll also go into more detail about all of those protocols, but that's sort of a preview of those.
Can we do one more?
One more, Eric.
Schedules.
Mhm.
When will students get schedules, and when will it be announced who will be doing who will be teaching?
Yes. So the question is, when will the students pick up their schedules, and when will we know who's going to teach what grades, who's teaching virtually, and who's teaching face-to-face? Well, the first step is to hear from you as parents what you prefer, and that we're having by Friday. And then a team of us will start working this weekend on building out how many teachers we need for virtual in elementary, and how many class sections will be virtual in secondary and intermediate, or intermediate and secondary. So it will take us another 2 weeks to build out a master schedule and then put students in classes. So my guess is that students can expect to have a schedule the week before school starts, which is very similar to the time frame that we've used in the past. It won't be any later. So thank you all for attending tonight. We hope that this has been helpful, help you better understand. Some of our colleagues have put out videos. We thought maybe a town hall question and answer where you can get your direct questions answered would be best. We always stand to accept questions from you at any time. Feel free to email me or Beth Campbell. We'll get right back with you and answer if we know it. If not, we will find the answer. But I thank all of you for your patience, your understanding as we're working through this.